Okay, we're going to kickstart that again. It's feeling a little darker tonight. I hope that you can see me as well as you always have, because we're going to be reading chapter 6. It's been a wonderful week. Wasn't today's weather just fantastic? I'm feeling quite warm tonight. No big jerseys and scarves. So maybe we're having a respite, especially because we're back to school on Tuesday. So this is good news for us having to wake up early next week. But before we get on to chapter 6, I wanted to talk to you a little bit. First of all, if you haven't joined me before, we're reading Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. My name is Lauren, and I run an assisted learning and intervention centre called Omatis. I run it in Berario from the Berario Recreation Centre, and this is my way of giving back and getting reading out there and getting the story out there, and yeah, I'm really enjoying it. So I hope you are able to watch it, even if it's not live, and I hope you're enjoying it too. Some of the things I've been speaking about have been about get yourself comfortable. In the past, everyone wanted kids to sit straight at desks with their feet on the floor, and there's definitely merit to that. But then you get some crazy kids like you guys, and that maybe you want to be upside down, hanging off the couch with the book, I don't know, not anywhere near you. Maybe you want to be on a bouncing ball. Maybe you want to be swinging. And that's how you get your system and your brain to listen and think better. So you kind of do, and you find out what makes you tick and what makes learning and being in the world easier for you. And then you do that. But I don't suggest you do hanging from the rafters in the middle of your maths class. I don't think that's going to work out so well. But definitely when you're at home studying, definitely when you're reading. And reading is something I really hope you start loving, if you don't love it already, and that you do it forever. I mean, look at old me, and I'm still reading. Look at the books behind me, and that's just one of my bookshelves. So reading has been a big part of my life. And yesterday I read about a little excerpt to parents about how books can just take your kids anywhere and teach you all sorts of lessons. And I truly believe that, 100%. So I want to talk just a little bit today about mistakes. So I know yesterday I hadn't pre-read the chapter, and if I'm completely honest, I haven't pre-read this one either. But let's talk a little bit about getting it wrong. I think that we need to get it wrong. First of all, the science, the brain science, the neuroscience is telling us that when we get something wrong, our brains get stronger. Our brains grow. The connection between neurons grows. New connections are made. Old connections get stronger. So mistakes are things that really are important for us. So when we attend school and we think we're expected to get everything right, we're wrong. We're making a mistake when we think that. We need to be curious as kids, as adults. We need to be thinking about what we're doing, how we're getting it wrong, how can we make it better, because mistakes make us smarter. So go ahead and make as many mistakes as you want, and then as you master something and you start to get that right, well, challenge yourself. Step into mistakes again and keep going. So I wanted to say that failure is more a part of learning than success is. And it should be that way. And I just love failure. At my school, all the kids know that mistakes are what I want to see. I want to see where they went wrong. Can we find the patterns? What could they do differently? All these amazing questions come out. And they finish their week. They get to the Friday and they're, wow, I learned a lot. And they really want to come back to school on Monday morning. So mistakes are important, and they should be loved, and they should be embraced. So do that for yourself. Do yourself that favor. And I would honestly, at home as a mom, when I'm teaching my kids to set the table or clear the table or make their own lunch or whatever I'm teaching them to do, I would rather have 10 broken plates and have a smile on their face at the end of it when they've figured out for themselves and they could do it all independently, than all my plates intact and my kids sitting on the couch while I'm doing all the work and they're learning nothing. So as a mom, I'm okay with the failures. In fact, I love them. Because every time, moms and dads and teachers, every time you take over or fix what they've done, make it better, do it for them, whether it's making their bed or putting on their shoes or packing their bag or greeting their friend or playing on the jungle, whatever it is, every time you take it away and you say, never mind, I'll do it, you're saying, I as your mom or your dad can do it better than you. And then what is the kid thinking? Either, okay, then you do it all, and then we're left with a whole bunch of kids on the couch and a whole bunch of parents that are overstressed, or the kid, more dangerously, the kid starts thinking, you don't believe in me? You don't think I can learn this? Okay, I must be not as great, not as good as I'd like to be. But I get that. I get how parents do that. I do it. And I'm busy working on trying to not do it, trying to catch myself taking over from them and allowing the bed not to be perfectly made and allowing the dishes not to be perfectly washed and allowing the homework not to be perfectly done, because they can do it their way. If they can do it their way, then they start learning. And those mistakes can be embraced, and those mistakes can create more learning. And hi, Patty, I see you're watching. And there's an amazing video you showed us, I think about 3 years ago, where if you can tap into the kids' knowledge of themselves, even though it's wrong, and we can go with those mistakes, we can lift them out of the mistakes. And Patty, you're reminding me of this, that you had a little kid that could only say no, and you went with the no and said the no and brought the kid all the way into your version of the no until you said yes and he said yes. And isn't that amazing that even something that we didn't want him to do, that when we tap into that, when we go to the kids' world, we can get them out. It's when we stand on the sidelines. It's when we let them fail in the arena, and you can go and look at Brene Brown's work and President Roosevelt, American president's speech about being in the arena. When we stand in the bleachers, when we sit in the stands and we watch our kids in the mud and we don't go down there, we should go down there. We should get in the arena with our kids right next to them and help them stand up every time. And I just love that idea. So if you think it's faster if you do it, if you think they'll get it wrong, if you think they won't know how to do it, if you think your house will be embarrassing if your kids are making the beds and they look terrible, if you think people will judge you based on your kid, stop. Your kid is the most important thing. Let them fail. Let them make mistakes. 3 goals. Embrace the opportunity for failure. Find ways to learn from that failure and get curious, because a curious mind is primed to learn. It leans forward. A curious mind listens. It asks great questions. It looks for alternatives. You can't be curious if you think you know it all. And believe me, you don't know it all. So get curious and love the failures, because that's what's making everyone strong. So that was what I wanted to share tonight, Friday night, before we start reading. So I hope you forgive and love my failures as I read chapter 6 and maybe get the punctuation wrong and even the pronunciations of words. But I'm looking forward to chapter 6. I'm worried that it might be not too exciting, because chapter 5 wasn't that exciting. But let's see. I love the surprise of it. So chapter 6 of, let me show you again, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief is called I Become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. Okay, let's get reading. Once I got over the fact that my Latin teacher was a horse. Can you believe? We had a nice tour, though I was careful not to walk behind him. Smart. I'd done Pooper Scooper Patrol in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade a few times, and I'm sorry I did not trust Sharon's back end the way I trusted his front end. Excuse me. We passed the volleyball pit. Several of the campers nudged each other. One pointed to the Minotaur horn I was carrying. Another said, "That's him." Most of the campers were older than me. Their satire friends were bigger than Grover, all of them trotting around in orange Camp Half-Blood t-shirts, but nothing else to cover their bare, shaggy hindquarters. I wasn't normally shy, but the way they stared at me made me uncomfortable. I felt like they were expecting me to do a cartwheel or something. I looked back at the farmhouse. It was a lot bigger than I'd realized. 4 stories tall, sky blue with white trim, like an upmarket seaside resort. I was checking out the Brass Eagle weather vane on top when something caught my eye. A shadow in the uppermost window of the attic gable. Something had moved the curtain just for a second, and I got the distinct impression I was being watched. "What's up there?" I asked Sharon. He looked where I was pointing, and his smile faded. "Just the attic." "Somebody lives there?" "No," he said with finality. "Not a single living thing." I got the feeling he was being truthful, but I was also sure something had moved that curtain. "Come along, Percy," Sharon said, his light-hearted tone now a little forced. "Lots to see." We walked through the strawberry fields, where campers were picking bushels of berries, while a satire played a tune on a reed pipe. Sharon told me the camp grew a nice crop for export to New York restaurants and Mount Olympus. "It pays our expenses," he exclaimed, "and the strawberries take almost no effort." He said Mr. D had this effect on fruit-bearing plants. They just went crazy when he was around. It worked best with wine grapes, but Mr. D was restricted from growing those, so he grew strawberries instead. I watched the satire playing his pipe. His music was causing lines of bugs to leave the strawberry patch in every direction, like refugees fleeing a fire. These bugs are leaving. I wondered if Grover could work that kind of magic with music. I wondered if he was still inside the farmhouse, being lectured by Mr. D. Grover won't get in too much trouble, will he?" I asked Sharon. "I mean, he was a good protector, really." Sharon sighed. "He shed his tweed jacket and draped it over his horse's back like a saddle." Well, that's convenient. Imagine that for your backpack at school. "Grover has big dreams, Percy, perhaps bigger than are reasonable. To reach his goal, he must first demonstrate great courage by succeeding as a keeper, finding a new camper and bringing him safely to Half-Blood Hill. But he did that." "I might agree with you," Sharon said, "but it is not my place to judge. Dionysus and the Council of Cloven Elders must decide. I'm afraid they might not see this assignment as a success. All over, Grover lost you in New York. Then there's the unfortunate fate of your mother, and the fact that Grover was unconscious when you dragged him over the property line. The council might question whether this shows any courage on Grover's part." I wanted to protest. None of what had happened was Grover's fault. I also felt really, really guilty. If I hadn't given Grover the slip at the bus station, he might not have got into trouble. "He'll get a second chance, won't he?" Sharon winced. "I'm afraid that was Grover's second chance, Percy. The council was not anxious to give him another, either, after what happened the first time, 5 years ago. Olympus knows. I advised him to wait longer before trying again. He's still so small for his age." "How old is he?" "Oh, 28. "What? And he's in 6th grade? Satyrs mature half as fast as humans, Percy. Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student for the past 6 years. Imagine being in primary school for 20 years. That's a long time, a lot of fun, long time. That's horrible. Quite, Sharon agreed. At any rate, Grover is a late bloomer, even by satire standards, and not yet very accomplished in woodland magic. Alas, he was anxious to pursue his dream. Perhaps now he will find some other career. That's not fair, I said. What happened the first time? Was it really so bad? Oh, I'm thinking ahead. I'm trying to figure out what I think Grover did on his first chance and why he needed a second chance. Okay, let's read on. Sharon looked away quickly. Let's move along, shall we? Oh, I hope he tells us. But I wasn't quite ready to let the subject drop. Something had occurred to me when Sharon talked about my mother's fate, as if he was intentionally avoiding the word death. The beginnings of an idea, a tiny, hopeful fire, started forming in my mind. Ooh, maybe he's thinking his mom hasn't died. Sharon, I said, if the gods and Olympus and all that are real. Yes, child. Does that mean the underworld is real too? Sharon's expression darkened. Yes, child. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. There is a place where spirits go after death. But for now, until we know more, I would urge you to put that out of your mind. What do you mean, until we know more? Come, Percy, let's see the woods. I'm guessing Sharon doesn't want to answer questions. As we got closer, I realized how huge the forest was. It took up at least a quarter of the valley, with trees so tall and thick, you could imagine nobody had been in there since the Native Americans. Sharon said, the woods are stocked, if you care to try your luck, but go armed. Woods are stocked. Stocked with what? I said. Armed with what? You'll see. Capture the Flag is Friday night. Do you have your own sword and shield? My own? No, Sharon said. I didn't suppose you do. I think a size 5 will do. I'll visit the armory later. Imagine that, being told you need a shield and a sword and that you're going to play Capture the Flag with a shield and a sword. I mean, that's insane. I think Percy's feeling a little nervous, maybe? Maybe excited. I wanted to ask what kind of summer camp had an armory, but there was too much else to think about, so the tour continued. We saw the archery range, that could be fun, the canoeing lake, the stables, which Sharon didn't seem to like very much, the javelin range, the sing-along amphitheatre, the arena where Sharon said they held sword and spear fights. Sword and spear fights, I asked. Cabin challenges and all that, he explained. Not lethal, usually. Oh, yes. And there's the mess hall. A mess hall is where you eat. It's like a cafeteria or a restaurant. Sharon pointed to an outdoor pavilion framed in white Grecian columns on a hill overlooking the sea. There were a dozen stone picnic tables. No roof, no walls. What do you do when it rains? I asked. Sharon looked at me as if I'd gone a little weird. We still have to eat, don't we? I decided to drop the subject. Finally, he showed me the cabins. There were 12 of them nestled in the woods by the lake. They were arranged in a U, with 2 at the base and 5 in a row on either side. And they were without doubt the most bizarre collection of buildings I'd ever seen. Except for the fact that each had a large brass number above the door, odds on the left side, evens on the right, they looked absolutely nothing alike. But 9 had smokestacks like a tiny factory. Oh, number 9, sorry. Number 4 had tomato vines on the walls and a roof made out of real grass. 7 seemed to be made of solid gold, which gleamed so much in the sunlight it was almost impossible to look at. They all faced a commons area about the size of a soccer field, dotted with Greek statues, fountains, flower beds, and a couple of basketball hoops, which were more my speed, which means he likes basketball, I think. In the centre of the field was a huge stone-lined fire pit. Even though it was a warm afternoon, the hearth smouldered. The hearth is the fireplace, and it's smouldering, so even though it was warm, there was a fire going. A girl about 9 years old was tending the flames, poking the coals with a stick. There you go, a 9-year-old girl can tend a fire. I'm sure she got it wrong a couple of times before she got it right. The pair of cabins at the head of the field, numbers 1 and 2, looked like his and hers mausoleums, big white marble boxes with heavy columns in front. Cabin 1 was the biggest and bulkiest of the 12. Its polished bronze doors shimmered like a holograph, so that from different angles, lightning bolts seemed to streak across them. Cabin 2 was more graceful somehow, with slimmer columns garlanded with pomegranates and flowers. The walls were carved with images of peacocks. Zeus and Hera, I guessed. Correct, Sharon said. The cabins look empty. Several of the cabins are, that's true. No one ever stays in 1 or 2. Okay, so each cabin had a different god, like a mascot. 12 cabins for the 12 Olympians. But why would some be empty? I stopped in front of the first cabin on the left, cabin 3. Whoa, hold on a second now. So I was thinking, why is Richard Rawdon, the author, taking so long to explain all of these cabins? I mean, cabins are cabins, but now I get it. So they are the Olympians, the Greek gods' cabins. So it makes sense. So I'm going to carry on reading now. I stopped in front of the first cabin on the left, cabin 3. It wasn't high and mighty like cabin 1, but long and low and solid. The outer walls were of rough grey stone studded with pieces of seashell and coral, as if the slabs had been hewn straight from the bottom of the ocean floor. I peeked inside the open doorway and Sharon said, "Oh, I wouldn't do that." This is interesting. So, do you think when you see a house for the first time that if you look at how the house is positioned and decorated, you might get some idea of what the person is like that lives in that house? And when you see a person for the first time, do you think how they dressed and how they act could give you a clue as to what kind of person they are? Or when you see a book for the first time, do you think the cover and what's on the front and what's on the back might give you a clue as to what kind of book it is? Do we judge a book by its cover? Do we judge a person in the first few seconds? I'm thinking. But let me carry on reading. Before he could pull me back, I caught the salty scent of the interior, like the wind on the shore at Montauk. The interior walls glowed like abalone. There were 6 empty bunk beds with silk sheets turned down, but there was no sign anyone had ever slept there. The place felt so sad and lonely. I was glad when Sharon put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Come along, Percy." Most of the other cabins were crowded with campers. Number 5 was bright red, a real nasty paint job, as if the colour had been splashed on with buckets and fists. The roof was lined with barbed wire. A stuffed wild boar's head hung over the doorway, and its eyes seemed to follow me. Inside, I could see a bunch of mean-looking kids, both girls and boys, arm wrestling and arguing with each other, while rock music blared. The loudest was a girl, maybe 13 or 14. She wore a size XXXL Camp Half-Blood t-shirt and a camouflage jacket. She zeroed in on me and gave me an evil sneer. She reminded me of Nancy Bobofit. Remember Nancy from chapter 1? Percy's bully. Though the camp girl was much bigger and tougher looking, and her hair was long and stringy and brown instead of red. I kept walking, trying to stay clear of Sharon's hooves. We haven't seen any other centaurs, I observed. No, Sharon said sadly. My kinsmen are a wild and barbaric folk, I'm afraid. Okay, you must look up the word barbaric. That's a very interesting word. So it's spelt bar-bar-ic. But the two bars have different pronunciations, so it's not barbaric, it's barbaric. So my challenge is that you go and look it up and see what you think it is. See what you find it out to be. My kinsmen are a wild and barbaric folk, I'm afraid. You might encounter them in the wilderness or at major sporting events, but you won't see any here. You said your name was Sharon. Are you really? He smiled down at me. The Sharon from the stories. Trainer of Hercules and all that? Yes, Percy, I am. But shouldn't you be dead? Sharon paused, as if the question intrigued him. I honestly don't know about should be. The truth is, I can't be dead. You see, the eons ago, eons, that's another awesome word, it means long, long time ago. You see, eons ago, the gods granted my wish. I could continue the work I loved. I could be a teacher of heroes, as long as humanity needed me. I gained much from that wish, and I gave up much. But I'm still here, so I can only assume I'm still needed. I thought about being a teacher for 3,000 years. It wouldn't have made my top 10 things to wish for. It's like being in primary school for 20 years, except worse. Doesn't it ever get boring? No, he said. Horribly depressing at times, but never boring. Why depressing? Sharon seemed to turn hard of hearing again. Have you ever had that? Or your dad? Or your mum suddenly stops hearing you? Oh, look, he said. Annabeth is waiting for us. Let's see how long this chapter is. Oh, this chapter's kind of long. I'm going to carry on. The blonde girl I'd met at the big house was reading a book in front of the last cabin on the left, number 11. When we reached her, she looked me over critically, like she was still thinking about how much I'd ruled. I tried to see what she was reading, but I couldn't make out the title. I thought my dyslexia was acting up. Then I realized the title wasn't even English. The letters looked Greek to me. I mean, literally Greek. There were pictures of temples and statues in different kinds of columns, like those in an architecture book. Annabeth, Sharon said, I have master's archery class at noon. Would you take Percy from here? Yes, sir. Cabin 11, Sharon told me, gesturing towards the doorway. Make yourself at home. Out of all the cabins, 11 looked the most like a regular old summer camp cabin, with the emphasis on old. The threshold was worn down, the brown paint peeling. Over the doorway was one of those doctor's symbols, a winged pole with 2 snakes wrapped around it. What did they call that? I'm not going to try this word. A caduceus? A caduceus? Oh, somebody out there knows how to pronounce it. I'm going to have to look that up and get back to you. Inside, it was packed with people, both boys and girls, way more than the number of bunk beds. Sleeping bags were spread all over the floor. It looked like a gym where the Red Cross had set up an evacuation center. That's a good metaphor, a good analogy. Sharon didn't go in. The door was too low for him. But when the campers saw him, they all stood and bowed respectfully. Well then, Sharon said, good luck, Percy. I'll see you at dinner. He galloped away towards the archery range. I stood in the doorway looking at the kids. They weren't bowing anymore. They were staring at me, sizing me up. I knew this routine. I'd gone through it enough at school. Well, Annabeth prompted, go on. So naturally, I tripped coming in the door and made a total fool of myself. There were some snickers from the campers, but none of them said anything. Annabeth announced, Percy Jackson meets cabin 11. Regular or undetermined, somebody asked. I didn't know what to say, but Annabeth said, undetermined. Everybody groaned. A guy who was a little older than the rest came forward. Now, campers, that's what we're here for. Welcome, Percy. You can have that spot on the floor right over there. The guy was about 19, and he looked pretty cool. He was tall and muscular, with short, cropped, sandy hair and a friendly smile. He wore an orange tank top, cut-offs, sandals, and a leather necklace with 5 different color clay beads. The only thing unsettling about his appearance was a thick white scar that ran from just beneath his right eye to his jaw, like an old knife slash. "This is Luke," said Annabeth, and her voice sounded different somehow. I glanced over and could have sworn she was blushing. She saw me looking and her expression hardened again. "He's your counselor for now." "For now?" I asked. "You're undetermined," Luke explained patiently. "They don't know what cabin to put you in, so you're here. Cabin 11 takes all newcomers, all visitors. Naturally we would. Hermes, our patron, is the guard of travellers." That makes sense. I looked at the tiny section of floor they'd given me. I had nothing to put there to mark as my own. No luggage, no clothes, no sleeping bag. Just the Minotaur's horn. I thought about setting that down, but then I remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves. I looked around at the campus' faces, some sullen and suspicious, some grinning stupidly, some eyeing me as if they were waiting for a chance to pick my pockets. Haven't you ever had that where you walk into a room of strangers and everyone's kind of sussing you out differently? "How long will I be here?" I asked. "Good question," Luke said. "Until you're determined." "How long will that take?" The campers all laughed. "Come on," Annabeth told me. "I'll show you the volleyball court." "I've already seen it." "Oh, come on." She grabbed my wrist and dragged me outside. I could hear the kids of cabin 11 laughing behind me. When we were a few meters away, Annabeth said, "Jackson, you have to do better than that." "What?" She rolled her eyes and mumbled under her breath. "I can't believe I thought you were the one." "What's your problem?" I was getting angry now. "All I know is I kill some bull guy." "Don't talk like that," Annabeth told me. "You know how many kids at this camp wish they'd had your chance?" "To get killed?" "To fight the Minotaur. What do you think we train for?" I shook my head. "Look, if the thing I fought really was the Minotaur, the same one in the stories, yes. Then there's only one, yes. And he died like a jigillion years ago, right? Theseus killed him in the labyrinth. First of all, okay, jigillion. So jigillion is a made-up word. So there's not really jigillion, but it's a figure of speech called a hyperbole, when you exaggerate. So when your mom says, "I've told you 1,000,000 times," she actually hasn't told you 1,000,000 times, but she feels like she told you 1,000,000 times, so she's exaggerating. So the word gajillion is a made-up word that means many, 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 many. Monsters don't die, Percy. They can be killed, but they don't die. Oh, thanks. That clears it up. They don't have souls like you and me. You can dispel them for a while, maybe even for a whole lifetime if you're lucky, but they are primal forces. Sharon calls them archetypes. Eventually they reform. I thought about Mrs. Dodds. "You mean if I killed one accidentally with a sword? Your math teacher, that's right. She's still out there. You just made her very, very mad." "How did you know about Mrs. Dodds?" "You talk in your sleep." You almost called her something. A furry? You're Hades torturers, right? Well, they're Hades torturers? Annabeth glanced nervously at the ground, as if she expected it to open up and swallow her. "You shouldn't call them by name, even here. We call them the kindly ones, if we have to speak of them at all. Look, Is there anything we can say without it thundering? I sounded whiny even to myself, but right then I didn't care. Why do I have to stay in cabin 11 anyway? Why is everybody so crowded there? There are plenty of empty bunks right over there. I pointed to the first few cabins, and Annabeth turned pale. You don't just choose a cabin, Percy. It depends on who your parents are, or your parent. She stared at me, waiting for me to get it. My mom is Sally Jackson, I said. She works at the candy store in Grand Central Station. At least she used to. I'm sorry about your mom, Percy, but that's not what I mean. I'm talking about your other parent, your dad. He's dead. I never knew him. Annabeth sighed. Clearly, she'd had this conversation before with other kids. Your dad's not dead, Percy. How can you say that? You know him? No, of course not. Then how can you say... Because I know you. You wouldn't be here if you weren't one of us. You don't know anything about me? No, she raised an eyebrow. I bet you moved around from school to school. I bet you were kicked out of a lot of them. Diagnosed with dyslexia? Probably ADHD too? I tried to swallow my embarrassment. What does that have to do with anything? Taken together, it's almost a sure sign. The letters float off the page when you read, right? That's because your mind is hardwired for ancient Greek. And the ADHD? You're impulsive? You can't sit still in classrooms? That's your battlefield reflexes. In a real fight, they'd keep you alive. As for the attention problems, that's because you see too much, Percy, not too little. Your senses are better than a regular mortal's. Of course, the teachers want you medicated. Most of them are monsters. They don't want you seeing them for what they are. You sound like you went through the same thing. Most of the kids here did. If you weren't like us, you couldn't have survived the Minotaur, much less the ambrosia and the nectar. Ambrosia and nectar? The food and drink we were giving you to make you better. That stuff would have killed a normal kid. Would have turned your blood to fire and your bones to sand, and you'd be dead. Face it, you're a half-blood. A half-blood. I was reeling with so many questions I didn't know where to start. Then a husky voice yelled, "Well, a newbie?" I looked over. The big girl from the ugly red cabin was sauntering towards us. She had 3 older girls behind her, all big and ugly and mean-looking like her, all wearing camo jackets. Do you think Percy really thinks they're ugly? Or do you think he's using ugly like he's a little afraid of them, or they look like they're mean? I'm not too sure that he actually means the word ugly. I'm not too sure that I like the word. But be as it may, it's in the book. Clarice, Annabel sighed. Why don't you go and polish your spur or something? Sure, Miss Princess, the big girl said, so I can run you through with it Friday night. Like you run a sword through. You know, a pirate might run you through with their sword. Ereti eskrokos, Annabel said, which I somehow understood was Greek for go to the crows, though I had a feeling was a worse curse than it sounded. You don't stand a chance. We'll pulverize you, Clarice said, but her eye twitched. Perhaps she wasn't so sure she could follow through on the threat. She turned towards me. Who's this little runt? Percy Jackson, Annabeth said. Meet Clarissa, daughter of Ares. I blinked. Like the war god? Clarice sneered. You got a problem with that? No, I said, recovering my wits. It explains the bad smell. Clarice growled. We got an initiation ceremony for newbies, Percy. Whatever. Come on. Oh, sorry. Percy. He's giving his name. Whatever. Come on, I'll show you. Clarice, Annabeth tried to say. Stay out of it, wise girl. Annabeth looked pained, but she did stay out of it. and I didn't really want her help. I was the new kid. I had to earn my own reputation. I handed Annabeth my minotaur horn, and I got ready to fight, but before I knew it, Clarice had me by the neck and was dragging me towards a cinder block building that I knew immediately was the bathroom. The chapter is called... I became Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. Okay, this is making sense. I was kicking and punching. I'd been in plenty of fights before, but this big girl, Clarice, had hands like iron. She dragged me into the girls' bathroom. There was a line of toilets on one side and a line of shower stalls down the other. It smelled just like any public bathroom, and I was thinking, as much as I could think with Clarice ripping my hair out, that if this place belonged to the gods, they should have been able to afford classier toilets. Clarice's friends were all laughing, and I was trying to find the strength I'd used to fight the Minotaur, but it just wasn't there. Like his big 3 material, Clarice said as she pushed me towards one of the toilets. Yeah, right. Minotaur probably fell over laughing. He was so stupid looking. Her friends snickered. Annabeth stood in the corner, watching through her fingers. Clarice bent me over on my knees and started pushing my head towards the toilet bowl. It reeked like rusted pipes and, well, like what goes in toilets. I strained to keep my head up. I was looking at the scrummy water thinking, I will not go into that. I won't. Then something happened. I felt a tug in the pit of my stomach. I heard the plumbing rumble, the pipes shudder. Clarice's grip on my hair loosened. Water shot out of the toilet, made an arc straight over my head, and the next thing I knew, I was sprawled on the bathroom tiles with Clarice screaming behind me. I turned just as water blasted out of the toilet again, hitting Clarice straight in the face so hard it pushed her down onto her butt. The water stayed on her like the spray from a fire hose, pushing her backwards into the shower stall. She struggled, gasping, and her friends started coming towards her. But then the other toilets exploded too, and 6 more streams of toilet water blasted them back. The showers acted up too, and together all the fixtures sprayed the camouflaged girls right out of the bathroom, spinning them around like pieces of garbage being washed away. As soon as they were out the door, I felt the tug in my gut lessen and the water shut off as quickly as it had started. The entire bathroom was flooded. Annabeth hadn't been spared. She was dripping wet, but she hadn't been pushed out the door. She was standing in exactly the same place, staring at me in shock. I looked down and realized I was sitting in the only dry spot in the whole room. There was a circle of dry floor around me. I didn't have one drop of water on my clothes, nothing. I stood up, my legs shaky. Annabeth said, "How did you—" "I don't know." We walked to the door. Outside, Clarice and her friends were sprawled in the mud, and a bunch of other campers were gathered around to gawk. Clarice's hair was flattened across her face. Her camouflage jacket was sopping, and she smelled like sewage. She gave me a look of absolute hatred. "You are dead, new boy. You are totally dead." I probably should have let it go, but I said, "You want to gargle with toilet water again, Clarice? Close your mouth." Her friends had to hold her back. They dragged her towards cabin 5 while the other campers made way to avoid her flailing feet. Annabeth stared at me. I couldn't tell whether she was just grossed out or angry at me for dousing her. "What?" I demanded. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," she said, "that I want you on my team for Capture the Flag." And that is the end of chapter 6. Wow, I like that chapter. That was a really good chapter. It was long. I hope you stayed with me through the whole thing. I hope you enjoyed it. So did you notice I learned from yesterday, even though I hadn't prepared the chapter, like I didn't prepare the chapter today, I learned from yesterday that if I slow down slightly, I don't make as many mistakes. I don't get the words wrong as often, and I'm better at reading with the punctuation. So I have learned from my mistakes already, and I'm getting better. And to end off, because it's almost time to say goodbye, I want to show you how much we've read. There you go, there's your book. We actually went quite far today with chapter 6. That was a big chapter. I'm really proud of you if you read with us. So we're going to be reading chapter 7 tomorrow. I promised I would read through the weekend. So 6:30 as usual. You don't have to watch me live. You can catch it on my Facebook page at any time. It stays right there. To end off, thank you. If you liked it, press like or love or thumbs up. Please share. I'd love for anybody who needs reading done for them or hasn't read the book and wants to hear about it or is studying it at school, share it. It'll get to them. Leave a comment if you liked it. And I will see you again tomorrow night. Sleep tight.